Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to go over President Putin's Empire of Lies speech, compare it to what's happening over the course of time, what it means, how salient it is in today's environment. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here. And a while back, let's see if I can get this. Let's see how we want to show this. A while back, President Vladimir Putin gave a speech, the Empire of Lies speech, February 24th, 2022. And Paul Craig Roberts over at the Institute for Political Economy shared that speech. I think it's important for us to revisit the speech. I've been talking about it. If you've been watching my show lately, I've been talking about it. So I'm going to go spend an hour on it. If we don't get it completely addressed in this go round, then I'll just rename this part one, and then I'll go over it again, because I think it's important not to skip anything. And I'd like to give my commentary on it and do some editorializing. All right, let's go. Maybe I can make it bigger. Let's do this. Let's make this thing bigger. It ain't all about me. Let's start here. Excuse me, Paul Craig Roberts, listen to me, Carl, starts off by saying that, showing it, and he says, read it so you understand the situation. You'll not get a word of truth from the mouth of Western politicians and prostitutes. Okay, so here's what he starts. Let's go over this thing. Citizens and of Russia and friends, I consider it necessary today to speak. They will not. Let's see. Okay. Facebook has pretty much, for some reason, Facebook won't let me record directly to it anymore. But what I will do is I will just put the for those of you who watch over on Facebook, I'll put the YouTube link over there so you can watch it there. Anyway, so here's what he says. I will begin with what I said in my address. He says, I consider it necessary today to speak again about the tragic events in Donbas and the key aspects of ensuring the security of Russia. That's what he's talking about, ensuring the security of Russia. The tragic events in Donbas, for those who may not know, is that the militants, the neo-Nazis in the Ukraine had dramatically increased their shelling of the civilians in the Donbas area in eastern Ukraine. So at that point, the Russians decided to act. Let's continue. He says, I will begin with what I said in my address on February 21st, 2022. I spoke about our biggest concerns and worries and about the fundamental threats which irresponsible Western politicians created for Russia consistently, rudely, and unceremoniously from year to year. Now, what's interesting about this is the continuing statements that the Russians have made about addressing what? The root causes. What term does he use here? Fundamental threats. From the very beginning of this speech, root causes, fundamental threats. Listen to this. I am referring to the eastward expansion of NATO, which is moving its military infrastructure ever closer to the Russian border. We have a consistency in the Empires of Lies speech. What did he do? He started off by saying, okay, look, they're attacking the people. There's tragedy. There's death in Donbas. So he made it clear. We have to address the rights, the health, and the safety of the Russian speakers in Ukraine. So that's a fundamental issue. That's a fundamental threat. That's a root cause. So now you understand the very first paragraph, he gives you the root causes, fundamental threats. Then what else does he say? I am referring to the eastward expansion of NATO. So In the very first paragraph, he gives you the root causes. And what have the Russians said? We have to address the root causes. And what are the root causes here? Not in any particular order, but the abuse, violence, mistreatment of the Russian speakers in Ukraine and the eastward expansion of NATO up to Russia's border, right? What does he say? Ever closer to the Russian border. He makes it clear. Here's the fundamental things. We got to deal with this. And again, Mearsheimer's talked about this. I certainly have my differences with Mearsheimer. He's talked about this. Look, this is great power politics. This is a great power. Russia saying other great powers are not going to come up to our border. You can come up to our border, but not without a fight. Very, very important. The very first paragraph, he tells you what it's all about. Let's continue. It is a fact that over the past 30 years, we have been patiently trying to come to an agreement with the leading NATO countries regarding the principles of equal and indivisible security in Europe. In response to our proposals, we invariably faced either cynical deception and lies or attempts at pressure and blackmail. While the North Atlantic Alliance continued to expand despite our protests and concerns, its military machine is moving and, as I said, is approaching our border. Again, the second paragraph, he makes the root cause clear. The second paragraph, what does he say? First paragraph, they're moving closer to our border. Second paragraph, they're moving closer to our border. But in the second paragraph, he does something very important because he then says, we've been trying for 30 years. And what did we get? Patiently to come to an agreement regarding the principles of equal and indivisible security. What does he say? We've been trying for 30 years to talk to these people saying, we don't want an advantage. You don't get an advantage. Let's live peacefully. But what does he have after that? In response, we invariably faced, he's got two things. Cynical deception. What was the cynical deception? Let me give you an example of the cynical deception, right? Number one, hey, let's have the Minsk Accords. Sure. What are the Minsk Accords? Oh, we just used that to keep you occupied a while we could arm Ukraine. Cynical deception and lies, right? Or attempts at pressure and blackmail. So what is that now? Hey, we're going to put sanctions on you. We're going to blackmail you. So basically, if I did a show with Jody Braun recently, and she talked about this. She says, she refers to the imperialists, and she says, you can't bargain with these people. She says, Russia and everyone else has tried. Hey, can we talk to you? Can we make a deal? All you're going to get is lies. All you're going to get is cynical deceptions. All you're going to get is pressure. They intend to destroy you and steal your stuff. There's no way in the world the West is going to make a deal with Russia. They've always been lying to them. They've always been trying to steal their stuff, take them over, go back to Napoleon, go back to Charles XII, on and on and on. That's all they've ever done. And President Putin, you notice he mentions, what year is this? The year was 2022. He said the last 30 years specifically, which means what? 1992. So basically he's saying, as soon as this thing fell, we tried to make a deal with you, and all you did was lie. And as Donald Trump would say, and I don't like it. So let's continue. Actually, I got that from Alex Macoris. Alex Christoforis. He always says, and I don't like it. I think that's so hilarious. Anyway, boom. Its military machine is moving. And as I said, approaching our border. When he says approaching, he means they're coming into Ukraine. And I don't like it. That ain't going to happen. Let's continue. Next paragraph. Why is this happening? Where did this insolent manner of talking down from the height of their exceptionalism, infallibility, and all permissiveness come from? Now, what else is he talking about there? This is important, right? What is the explanation for this contemptuous and disdainful attitude to our interests and absolute legitimate demands? So he makes it clear. They won't talk to us on an equal basis. Not only on an equal basis, talking down from the height of their exceptionalism. That's actually brilliant. Infallibility, their perfectness, all permissiveness. What is the explanation for this contemptuous and disdainful attitude to our interest and absolutely legitimate demands? We have a right. Our demands are legitimate. And wait a minute, why are they just talking to us like we're nothing? The answer is simple. Everything is clear and obvious. In the late 1980s, the Soviet Union grew weaker and subsequently broke apart. That experience should serve as a good lesson for us. Powerful, isn't it? Powerful. What's he saying now? Because it has shown us that the paralysis of power and will is the first step towards complete degradation and oblivion. He's saying we ain't going to fall apart like the Soviet Union did, right? The paralysis of power and will. He's saying you got to have power, but you got to have mental will. You got to have determination to stick together and fight, etc., right? We lost confidence for only one moment, but it was enough to disrupt the balance of forces in the world. So he's saying we lost confidence. That's why it fell apart, because we didn't have the, he's saying stand tight, keep your spine up. Okay, so let's continue. As a result, the old treaties and agreements are no longer effective. In treaties and requests do not help. Think about this. He's saying the deals we made with these people, they're worthless. In treaties and requests do not help. Anything that does not suit the dominant state, the powers that be, is denounced as archaic, obsolete, and useless. At the same time, everything it regards as useful is presented as the ultimate truth and forced on others, regardless of the cost, abusively and by any means available. Those who refuse to comply are subjected to strong arm tactics. So what's he saying? Look, you can request to these people, you can talk to them. It doesn't work. If it works for them, the deal's great. If it doesn't work for them, they're going to. He's saying you can't make a deal and trust them, isn't it? That's an issue of trust, right? If it works for them, everything it regards for you as useful is presented as the ultimate truth and forced on others. If it works for them, they're going to force it on you abusively and by any means available. See what I'm saying? And remember, how does we regard to them? The dominant state, the powers that be. So he's saying if they got power, they'll do whatever they want. They'll force whatever they want on you. They will not listen to you, and they'll force it by any means necessary. Doesn't matter what the cost is, right? Okay. What I am saying now, again, very, very powerful, very, very important. Big, and this explains what's going on in North Korea, what's going on with Iran, what just happened in light of what happened in Beijing. I felt like I had to talk about this. Let's listen to this. What I'm saying now does not concern only Russia, and Russia is not the only country that's worried about this. He's now, think about this. He's saying we talk to other people, right? Russia is not the only country that is worried about this. That means he talked to other people about it. I'm thinking Xi Jinping. This has to do with the entire system of international relations and sometimes even U.S. allies. The collapse of the Germany, right? Right. Okay. Now think about this. Even U.S. allies. I'm thinking India, because India considered itself a U.S. ally. The collapse of the Soviet Union led to a redivision of the world and the norms of international law that developed by that time. And the most important of them. Now let's listen to what Vladimir Putin considers the most important, right? And the most important of them, the fundamental norms that were adopted following World War II and largely formalized its outcome, came in the way of those who declared themselves the winner of the Cold War, right? Of course, practice, international relations, and the rules regarding them had to take into account the changes that took place in the world and in the balance of forces. However, this should have been done professionally, smoothly, patiently, and with due regard and respect for the interest of all states and one's own responsibility. So what's he saying? The United States was a very powerful country. We understand that. They should have been responsible. Instead, we saw a state of euphoria created by the feeling of absolute superiority, a kind of modern absolutism coupled with the low cultural standards. Interesting that. Low cultural standards, right? So he's saying the neocons were euphoric, absolute superiority. We won the Cold War. Whoa, we're the powerful. Nothing can stop us. We can do anything we want, right? Coupled with low cultural standards. You know what he's saying about that? Well, I'll leave that one alone. And arrogance of those who formulated and pushed through decisions that suited only themselves, the situation took a different turn. He goes back to situations that suited only themselves. He goes back to the belief that they can do anything they want and nobody can stop them. A selfish, arrogant, irresponsible, and contemptible attitude of pure hubris. That's what this man's talking about in this. So he starts off by saying, look, we had to do this because of what's happening on our border. 2, we ain't the only ones that are upset by this. 3, you had an opportunity where you had power and you acted irresponsible and you looked down on everything and you were euphoric that you won the Cold War. Very, very powerful. Let's continue. There are many examples of this. First, a bloody military operation was waged against Belgrade without the UN Security Council sanction, but with combat aircraft and missiles used in the heart of Europe. He reminds them they're the ones that started a war in Europe. The bombing of peaceful cities and vital infrastructure went on for several weeks. I have to recall these facts because some Western colleagues prefer to forget them. And when we mention the event, they prefer to avoid speaking about international law, instead emphasizing the circumstances which they interpret as they think necessary. So he's saying, hey, I got to bring this up because you guys want to pretend like it didn't happen. And when I bring it up, oh, well, let's talk about what was going on at the time. You ignore international law. Again, he reinforces what he was talking about, right? He reinforces, look, you guys right here in Europe attacked the country. You lied, you cheated, you used violence. And then what? When we brought it up, you wanted to pretend like it wasn't real. Let's continue. Then came the turn of Iraq, Libya, and Syria. The illegal use of military power against Libya and the distortion of all the UN Security Council decisions on Libya ruined the state, created a huge seat of international terrorism, and pushed the country towards a humanitarian catastrophe into the vortex of a civil war, which has continued there for years. The tragedy, which was created for hundreds and thousands and even millions of people, not only in Libya, but in the whole region. Listen to this. Listen to this. Important. People forgot this sentence. Has led to a large-scale exodus from the Middle East and North Africa to Europe. He reminds the Europeans that it was you who took out Libya. He doesn't bring it up that Muammar Gaddafi was on the phone 2 weeks before the regime change operation in Libya and told Tony Blair, you better not do this. Libya is the gateway to Africa and etc. And if you do this, a lot of people will leave all over this region and come to Europe. This is what he said. And they did it anyway. Why? Because that's what they wanted. They want a gigantic influx of cheap, almost slave wages labor. So they did it on purpose. But he reminds us, and he says, and people forget about this, the tragedy has led to a large-scale exodus from the Middle East and North Africa to Europe. They forget about that. They forget that he told them what was coming. And he told them that, he told them what they were going to do, and they were warned, and they did it on purpose because that's what they wanted to happen. They wanted that free labor. They got free labor from Eastern Europe first when they opened up Europe, and then they got free labor, cheap labor from North Africa and the Middle East. Let me continue. A similar fate was also prepared for Syria. The combat operations conducted by the Western coalition in that country without the Syrian government's approval or UN Security Council sanction can only be defined as aggression and intervention. Absolutely. Why does he say that? Because the Russians were in Syria at the request of the Syrian government. And he brings it out without the Syrian government's approval or UN Security Council sanction. That they did this on their own. And that's what they were going to Syria. So he goes on this. He goes on. President Putin goes on. But the example that stands apart from the above events is, of course, the invasion of Iraq without any legal grounds. They used the pretext of allegedly reliable information available in the United States without the presence of weapons of mass destruction, about the presence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. To prove that allegation, the U.S. Secretary of State held up a vial of white powder publicly for the whole world to see, assuring the international community that it was a chemical warfare agent created in Iraq. It later turned out that all of that was a fake and a sham, and that Iraq did not have any chemical weapons. Incredible and shocking, but true. Here's what he says. I love this. It's important. Because this is what I say. This is what you say. We witness lies made at the highest state level and voiced from the high UN rostrum. As a result, we see a tremendous loss in human life, damage, destruction, and a colossal upsurge of terrorism. He's bringing up the history of NATO and the U.S. empire. He's bringing up that they've lied and they've war after war, and he's bringing up the results of them. Let's continue. Overall, it appears that nearly everywhere in many regions of the world where the United States brought its law and order, this created bloody, non-healing wounds and the curse of international terrorism and extremism. I have only mentioned the most glaring, but far from only examples of disregard for international law. What's he saying? Don't come crying to me about international law. He brings these up and say, look, these are the most glaring, but far from the only examples. Again, let's continue. Next paragraph. This array includes promises not to expand NATO eastward even by an inch. To reiterate, they have deceived us, or to put it simply, they have played us. Sure, one often hears that politics is a dirty business. It could be, but it shouldn't be as dirty as it is now, not to such an extent. This type of con artist behavior is contrary not only to the principles of international relations, but also and above all to the generally accepted norms of morality and ethics. Where is justice and truth here? Just lies and hypocrisy all around. Think about it. This is the position that the Russians took. What did President Putin say? Where is justice and truth here? He brings up examples. He's a lawyer. What does he do? He puts forth his examples. This is what they did everywhere. And then he says, where is justice and truth here? Just lies and hypocrisy all around. Let us continue. Incidentally, U.S. politicians, political scientists, and journalists write and say that a veritable empire of lies has been created inside the United States in recent years. It is hard to disagree with this. It is really so. That's when he uses the term the empire of lies. And he says U.S. politicians and people inside the United States have said this. He didn't bring this up. He said, I got to agree with him. But one should not be modest about it. The United States is still a great country and a system-forming power. All its satellites not only humbly and obediently say yes to and parrot it at the slightest pretext, but also imitate its behavior and enthusiastically accept the rules it is offering them. Therefore, one can say with good reason and confidence that the whole so-called Western bloc formed by the United States in its own image and likeness in its entirety, the very same empire of lies. He brings Europe in, he brings all of them in. Says, look, you guys imitated. You were formed in its image. You're nothing. All of you are nothing but an empire of lies. Let's continue. Some people have never even read this speech. You got to read these things. I'm going to continue. As I said, I'm going to go on for an hour. At that point, I'll stop. I'll just rename this part 1, and we'll go on to part 2. As for our country, after the disintegration of the USSR, given the entire, and we think about this, this is important, given the entire unprecedented openness of the new modern Russia, its readiness to work honestly with the United States and other Western partners, and its practically unilateral disarmament, so he's saying this is what we did, they immediately tried to put the final squeeze on us, finish us off, and utterly destroy us. What does he say? We tried to be, again, he reiterates, hey, man, we tried to work. Its readiness to work honestly with the United States and other Western partners. They immediately tried to put the final squeeze on us, finish us off, and utterly destroy us. He makes it clear he understands the game plan. And we did what we did the right thing. They didn't work out. This is how it was in the 1990s and the early 2000s when the so-called collective West was actively supporting separatism and gangs of mercenaries in southern Russia. What victims, what losses we had to sustain, and what trials we had to go through at that time before we broke the back of international terrorism in the Caucasus. We remember this and will never forget. Never forget. Interesting. We will remember this. He thinks about the Caucasus. We'll remember this. And we will never forget. Let us continue. Properly speaking, the attempts to use us in their own interest never ceased until quite recently. They sought to destroy our traditional values and force on us their false values that would erode us, our people from within. The attitudes they have been aggressively imposing on their countries, attitudes that are directly leading to degradation and degeneration because they are contrary to human nature. This is not going to happen. No one has ever succeeded in doing this, nor will they succeed now. He makes it clear. Russia has their morals. Russia has their culture. They don't like what the direction the West culture is taken. What does he say? This is not going to happen. Ain't happening. Let us continue. Despite all that, in December 2021, we made yet another attempt to reach agreement with the United States and its allies on the principles of European security and NATO's non-expansion. Our efforts were in vain. Remember we said December 2021, that was the letter that they sent to NATO saying, we want to talk, right? Let's continue. Our efforts were in vain. The United States has not changed its position. It does not believe it necessary to agree with Russia on a matter that is critical for us. The United States is pursuing its own objectives while neglecting our interests. Of course, this situation begs a question. What next? What are we to expect? If history is any guide, we know that in 1940 and early 1941, the Soviet Union went to great lengths to prevent war or at least delay its outbreak. To this end, the USSR sought not to provoke the potential aggressor until the very end by refraining or postponing the most urgent and obvious preparations it had to make it defend itself from an imminent attack. When it finally acted, it was too late. So what are they saying? We tried to talk to you. Listen to what the man's saying. Hey, what next? This begs a question. What next? What are we to expect? He's telling you what they expected. As a result, the country was not prepared to counter the invasion by Nazi Germany, which attacked our motherland on June 22, 1941, without declaring war. The country stopped the enemy and went on to defeat it, but this came at a tremendous cost. The attempt to appease the aggressor ahead of the Great Patriotic War proved to be a mistake at a high cost for our people. Important sentence. If you want to understand what Russia was and is thinking, what did they say? The attempt to appease the aggressor ahead of the Great Patriotic War proved to be a mistake, which came at a high cost. So what does he say? They lied, they cheated, they continue to lie and cheat. Hey man, we tried this. We went through this before. Ain't happening again. We ain't trying to appease the aggressor ahead of a war. If it's war you want, it's war you'll get. What's he say? In the first months after the hostilities broke out, we lost vast territories of strategic importance, as well as millions of lives. We will not make this mistake the second time. We have no right to do so. Russia's saying we don't want more, but we're prepared for it. We are ready to fight. And they started fighting. But what they're saying, who is the aggressor? The aggressor was NATO. What Russia was saying right there is, we consider this a fight with NATO, not a fight with Ukraine. And guess what? Last time around, we pussyfooted around with you bastards, and it cost us, even though we won. Not again. Not again. We consider this a fight with NATO, and that's what it is. Let's continue. Those who aspire to global dominance have publicly designated Russia as their enemy. That's the neocons. That's the British, American, French, German empire, right? They did so with impunity. Make no mistake, they had no reason to act this way. It is true that they have considerable financial, scientific, technological, and military capabilities. He says they're strong, right? We are aware of this and have an objective view of the economic threats we have been hearing, just as our ability to counter this brash and never-ending blackmail. Let me reiterate that we have no illusions in this regard and are extremely realistic in our assessments. He's saying we know they're strong. He comes out right that. We ain't no illusions. We know they're strong. As for military affairs, even after the dissolution of the USSR and losing a considerable part of its capabilities, today's Russia remains one of the most powerful nuclear states. Moreover, it has a certain advantage in several cutting-edge weapons. In this context, there should be no doubt for anyone that any potential aggressor will face defeat and ominous consequences. Ominous consequences should it directly attack our country. So what is he saying? He reminds you, we got nukes. We got a lot of cutting edge weapons. Be no doubt, you attack us, you're going to lose. And ominous consequences if you directly attack our country. All right, let us continue. At the same time, technology, including in the defense sector, is rapidly changing. One day there is one leader and tomorrow another, but a military presence in territories bordering on Russia, if we permit it to go ahead, will stay for decades to come or maybe forever, creating an ever-mounting and totally unacceptable threat for Russia. They're saying we ain't going to. So here's what they're saying. Listen to what he says. Think about what this coalition of willingness says. He says, a military presence in territories bordering on Russia, if we permit it to go ahead, will stay for decades, creating an ever-mounting and, here's these words, totally unacceptable threat to Russia. Back then, he made it clear, there ain't going to be no NATO in Russia. There is going to be, and that's not going to happen. Unacceptable threat. Let's continue. So much for the coalition for the willing, huh? All right. Even now, with NATO's eastward expansion, the situation for Russia has been becoming worse and more dangerous by the year. Moreover, these past days, NATO leadership has been blunt in its statements that they need to accelerate and step up efforts to bring the alliance infrastructure closer to Russia's border. In other words, they have been toughening their position. We cannot stay idle and passively observe these developments. This would be an irresponsible, absolutely irresponsible thing for us to do. Again, he makes it clear over and over and over and over. This is about NATO expansion. This is about NATO expansion. This is about NATO coming to Ukraine. Unacceptable threat. Not going to happen. We're not scared to fight. We can fight. If you attack us, ominous consequences. One way or the other, you're going to lose. If we got to turn you into a parking lot, if you come up to our border, one way or the other, you're going to lose. All right. Any further expansion of the North Atlantic infrastructure or the ongoing efforts to gain a military foothold of the Ukrainian territory are unacceptable. Of course, the question is not about NATO itself. It merely serves as a tool of U.S. foreign policy. Important stuff you're hearing here. The problem is that in territories adjacent to Russia, which I have to note is our historical land, I have to note that because it may be our land again. A hostile anti-Russia is taking shape, fully controlled by the outside. It is doing everything to attract NATO armed forces and obtain cutting-edge weapons. Fully controlled from the outside, he says. For the United States and its allies, it is a policy of containing Russia with obvious geopolitical dividends. For our country, it is a matter of life and death. A matter of our historical future as a nation. This is not an exaggeration. This is a fact. It is not only a very real threat to our interests, but to the very existence of our state and to its sovereignty. It is the red line with which we have spoken about on numerous occasions. They have crossed it. He's making it clear. This is exactly what Obama said. This is not an exaggeration. For our country, it is a matter of life and death. It is a very real threat to our interests, but to the very existence of our state and and to its sovereignty. It is the red line which we have spoken about on numerous occasions, and they have crossed it. He's telling you, I will nuke your ass flat if it comes down to that. Don't want to do it, but understand what I'm saying. This brings me to the situation in Donbas. We can see that the forces that staged the coup in Ukraine in 2014 have seized power and are keeping it with the help of ornamental election procedures and have abandoned the path of a peaceful conflict settlement. For 8 years, for 8 endless years, we've been doing everything possible to settle the situation by peaceful political means. Everything was in vain. As I've said in my previous address, you cannot look without compassion at what is happening there. It became impossible to tolerate it. We had to stop that atrocity, that genocide of the millions of people who live there and who pin their hopes on Russia, on all of us. It is their aspirations, the feelings and pain of these people that were the main motivating force behind our decision to recognize the independence of the Donbas people's republics. I would like to additionally emphasize the following. Focused on their own goals, the leading NATO countries are supporting the far-right nationalists and neo-Nazis in Ukraine, those who will never forgive the people of Crimea and Sevastopol for making a free choice to unite with Russia. They will undoubtedly, interesting thing, try to bring war to Crimea just as they have done in Donbas, to kill innocent people just as members of the punitive units of Ukrainian nationalists and Hitler's accomplices did during the Great Patriotic War. They have also openly laid claim to several other Russian regions. So he makes it clear his position on Crimea, his position on eastern Ukraine. Hey, they've come up to our border. We got a problem. And they want to take back Crimea. They want to kill innocent people. They want to mistreat and murder the people of eastern Ukraine. Ain't happening. It's our responsibility to stop it. That's what he's saying. Let us continue. If we look at the sequence of events and the incoming reports, the showdown between Russia and these forces cannot be avoided. It's only a matter of time. They are getting ready and waiting for the right moment. Moreover, they went as far as to aspire to require nuclear weapons. We will not let this happen. Let's not forget, a week before that, in a meeting in Europe, Vladimir Zelensky said, yes, you should give us nukes. We want nuclear weapons. He makes it clear. We will not let this happen. And think about it. A martial artist, as I always said, hey, man, you're in self-defense, martial arts, any kind of self-defense you want. I have a right to say, don't come any further. I can hold my hand out. If you approach within a distance that you can injure me, he's a black belt. The man's a black belt. A person has a right to say, hey, man, I don't want any trouble. Don't come any closer. However, what's unspoken is if you come within a distance that you can hit me, you can use a weapon, you can stab me, you can attack me, you can act quicker than I can react. You can get a punch in, a kick in, a stab in before I can defend myself. I have a right to maintain a strategic distance from you, to say, stay back. If you get so close to me that you can harm me, I have to assume that you will, and I can't take that chance, and I got to attack first. That's what a person who is trained in self-defense is going to think. I don't want no trouble. Please stay away. But if you get close enough, you can hurt me. I can't take that chance. I got to act first. That's what he's saying, right? The showdown between Russia and these forces cannot be avoided. It's only a matter of time. That's what he's saying. Sooner or later, we're going to have to fight. And if I know me and you got to fight, I'm going to try to get in the first punch. If I know we got to fight, what am I going to wait for? He's speaking like a martial artist. I have already said that Russia accepted the new geopolitical reality after the dissolution of the USSR. We have been treating all new post-Soviet states with respect and will continue to act this way. We respect and will respect their sovereignty as proven by the assistance we provided to Kazakhstan when it faced tragic events and a challenge in terms of its statehood and integrity. However, Russia cannot feel safe, develop, and exist while facing a permanent threat from the territory of today's Ukraine. Let me remind you that in 2000 through 2005, we used our military to push back against terrorists in the Caucasus and stood up for the integrity of our state. We preserved Russia. In 2014, we supported the people of Crimea and Sevastopol. In 2015, we used our armed forces to create a reliable shield that prevented terrorists from Syria from penetrating Russia. This was a matter of defending ourselves. We had no other choice. The same is happening today. They did not leave us any other option for defending Russia and our people. other than the ones we are forced to use today. In these circumstances, we have to take bold and immediate action. The People's Republic of Donbas have asked Russia for help. In this context, the man's a lawyer. In accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter, with permission of Russia's Federation Council and in execution of the treaties of friendship and mutual assistance with the Donetsk People's Republic and the Lugansk People's Republic, ratified by the Federal Assembly on February 22nd, I have made a decision to carry out a special military operation. He lays down his legal argument. Now you can argue that it's legal, that it's good or bad, that you agree or not agree. But what does he do? He first goes out by saying when they attacked it, they cooked up a pack of lies and they attacked the country time after time when it suited them and they did whatever they want. I'm going to make a legal argument for my act on my border. And here's my legal argument. The purpose of this operation is to protect people who, for 8 years, have been facing humiliation and genocide perpetrated by the Kiev regime. To this end, now, this is illegal. He's a lawyer. This is the legal foundation for my act. Now, this is the act. We will seek to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, as well as to bring to trial those who perpetrated numerous bloody. People forget about this part. Bring to trial those who perpetrated numerous bloody crimes against civilians, including against citizens of the Russian Federation. It is not our plan to occupy the Ukrainian territory. We do not intend to impose anything on anyone by force. At the same time, we have been hearing an increasing number of statements coming from the West that there is no need anymore to abide by the document setting forth the outcomes of World War II, as signed by the totalitarian Soviet regime. How can we respond to that? The outcomes of World War II and the sacrifices our people had to make to defeat Nazism are sacred. This does not contradict the high values of human rights and freedoms and the reality that emerged over the post-war decades. This does not mean that nations cannot enjoy the right to self-determination, which is enshrined in Article 1 of the UN Charter. Let me remind you that the people living in territories which are part of today's Ukraine were not asked how they want to build their lives when the USSR was created after World War II. Freedom guides our policy, the freedom to choose independently our future and the future of our children. We believe that all the peoples living in today's Ukraine, anyone who wants to do this, must be able to make this right to make a free choice. He lays it out now. When we take parts of Ukraine, we're going to give these people a chance to vote and see what they want to do. And that's what they've done so far. In this context, I would like to address the citizens of Ukraine. In 2014, Russia was obliged to protect the people of Crimea and Sevastopol from those who you yourself called Nats. The people of Crimea and Sevastopol made their choice in favor of being with their historical homeland, Russia, and we support their choice. As I said, we could not act otherwise. The current events have nothing to do with the desire to infringe on the interest of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. They are connected with defending Russia from those who have taken Ukraine hostage and are trying to use it against our people, our country, and our people. I reiterate, we're acting to defend ourselves from the threats created for us and from the worse peril than what is happening now. Here's what he says. We're going to defend ourselves from something worse that has happened than what's happening now. I'm asking you, however hard this may be, to understand this and to work together with us so as to turn this tragic page as soon as possible and to move forward together without allowing anyone to interfere in our affairs and our relations, but developing them independently so as to create favorable conditions for overcoming all these problems and to strengthen us from within as a single whole. Despite the existence of state borders, I believe this in our common future. I would also like to address the military personnel of the Ukrainian armed forces. Interesting, isn't it? People forgot that he said this. Let me continue. Comrade officers, your fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers did not fight the Nazi occupiers and did not defend our common motherland to allow today's neo-Nazis to seize power in Ukraine. You swore the oath of allegiance to the Ukrainian people and not to the junta, the people's adversary, which is plundering Ukraine and humiliating the Ukrainian people. That would be the Kiev regime, wouldn't it? I urge you to refuse to carry out their criminal orders. I urge you to immediately lay down arms and go home. I will explain what this means. The military personnel of the Ukrainian army who do this will be able to freely leave the zone of hostilities and return to their families. I want to emphasize again that all responsibility for the possible bloodshed will lie fully and wholly with the ruling Ukrainian regime. I would now like to say something very important for those who may be tempted to interfere in these developments from the outside. Interesting, isn't it? Think about it. The coalition of the willing, he was talking to them then. No matter who tries to stand in our way, or all the more so create threats for our country and our people, they must know that Russia will respond immediately, and the consequences will be such as you have never seen in your entire history. No matter how the events unfold. Think about this, what he's saying. No matter how the events unfold, we are ready. He's saying no matter how you attack us, no matter if all of you attack us, we're ready. Now listen to what else he says. All the necessary decisions in this regard have been taken. I hope that my words will be heard. He ain't talking about these little provocations and all this stuff. He's saying, we've been over this before this happened. We've made our decisions. We're telling you, don't come in here. But if you do, we've already decided how we're going to react, right? They ain't acting off the cuff, right? No matter how the events unfold, we are ready. All the necessary decisions in this regard have been taken. I hope that my words will be heard. Now he goes on, citizens in Russia. The culture and values, experience, and traditions of our ancestors invariably provided a powerful underpinning for the well-being and the very existence of entire states and nations, their successes and viability. Of course, this directly depends on the ability to quickly adapt to constant change, maintain social cohesion, and readiness to consolidate and summon all the available forces in order to move forward. Thinking about this, he says, we got to be ready to consolidate and summon all the available forces in order to move forward. In other words, if we got to go on a complete and total full war footing, we got to be ready. That's what he says. We always need to be strong, but this strength can take on different forms. The empire of lies, which I mentioned in the beginning of my speech, proceeds in its policy primarily from rough, direct force. This is when our saying on being all brawn and no brains applies. We all know that having justice and truth on our side is what makes us truly strong. If this is the case, it would be hard to disagree with the fact that this is our strength and our readiness to fight that are the bedrock of independence and sovereignty and provide the necessary foundation for building a reliable future for your home, your family, and your motherland. Dear compatriots, I am certain that devoted soldiers and officers of Russia's armed forces will perform their duty with professionalism and courage. I have no doubt that the government, institutions at all levels, and specialists will work effectively to guarantee the stability of our economy, financial system, and social well-being. And the same applies to corporate executives and the entire business community. I hope that all parliamentary parties and civil society take a consolidated patriotic position. Let me say this. This goes back to what Andrei Martyanov discussed about how Russia views war in the most holistic way. Every part of Russia has to be part of the fight. Every man, woman, and child, every business, every factory, everything. And that's what President Putin is saying, right? Government institutions, the Russians' armed forces will perform their duty with professionalism and courage. The government institutions at all levels and specialists will guarantee the stability of our economy and social well-being. The same applies to corporate executives, entire business community, parliamentary parties, civil society, and he all says a consolidated, we're all together, patriotic position. At the end of the day, the future of Russia is in the hands of its multi-ethnic people, as has always been the case in our history. So what does he say? Hey, man, we can only do this if everybody works together to make sure this happens. It's in your hands. Interesting perspective. This means that the decisions that I made will be executed, that we will achieve the goals we have set and reliably guarantee the security of our motherland. I believe in your support and invincible force rooted in the love for our fatherland. So what in the end does President Putin says? that he believes in that the patriotic nature and the dedication of the Russian people to their country will make this happen. But it's interesting, all of the things that he laid out. You know, you have a lot of people who talk about the Empire of Lies speech, who never read it, who never listened to it. If you listen to it, man, this guy lays everything out, and he understands. He lays out. He gives you the historical context. He gives you the historical foundation for the reason that they made the decision. He goes back to World War II and what happens. He goes back to the errors that they've made in the past and how he believes that they can't make these same errors again, right? He gets into what's happened since World War II, the mistakes that have been made, what he thinks of the U.S. and its allies and their willingness and ability to make deals and to maintain the deals. He gets into American exceptionalism and European exceptionalism, how they just look down to Russia. Everything that you need to know about the perspective of the Russians is there. So all of the people who are looking at it saying, "Oh, they're naive. Oh, they'll never make. Oh, they don't understand." It's all in that speech. Everything is in that speech. Everything you need to understand. And he ends by saying, "Look, we already made all the decisions. We went off to that. The necessary decisions have been made." And he goes on to say, "We understand how this could happen. We understand the directions that this could go, and understand we will not be defeated." In other words, look, even if you attack us, we're ready for that. We're ready to fight, and we will not be defeated. So if you all decide you're going to attack us, we're going to fight you with everything we have. And in the end, we'll nuke the hell out of you. He doesn't say that, but he brings that up. He brings it up. Watch this. Watch this. I want to bring this up. He brings it up in two instances, and here's what he says. "As for our military affairs, after the dissolution of the USSR, losing a considerable part of our capabilities, today's Russia remains one of the most powerful nuclear states. Moreover, it has a certain advantage in several cutting-edge weapons. In this context, there should be no doubt," listen to this, "there should be no doubt for anyone that any potential aggressor will face defeat and ominous consequences." Ominous consequences. I think that shows what he means. "Should it directly attack our country?" And the second thing he says, well, he goes on that the other mention of nuclear is when he says, "Hey, Ukraine thought about you getting decided that they wanted to try to get nuclear weapons, and we ain't going to let that happen." So the bottom line is that's it. That is the Empire of Lies speech. I think it's important. I think it was critical that I go over that I review it, that I comment on it. I think it's important that everybody here, maybe listen to this a second time, see if you can pick things up. But the most important thing is share this on all your social media platforms. If you can, I thank everybody on Patreon. Become a Patreon person. We've got PayPal. We got buymeacoffee.com /Garland NH, Cash App, and of course you can mail whatever you would like to mail to my PO box. Certainly appreciate that, everybody. Now, before I go, I think what I need to do, I saw a couple of super chats, so I'm going to go over the super chats. Okay. Mark says, "Garland, please make a clip of the Putin speech." I could do that. Thank you, Ivan, for the super sticker. I could just maybe I'll do another one where I simply read it, but maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. "Garland, love all your broadcasts, sir. Please dissect 2007 Munich speech too. Want you to go with Mr. Ritter to visit Russia. I'll be jealous." Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate it, everyone. And I am trying to raise money. Hopefully I'll get enough to go to Moscow. Don't know whether or not that'll happen. But however, if you can see all of the ways to you can see all the ways that you can contribute. If you want to contribute to that, hopefully I can get my tickets and go to Moscow. And certainly if you want to, you can there's my PO box if you want to mail a check or anything. If anybody wants to contribute to Garland getting to go to Moscow with Scott Ritter, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you very much. All right, thank you all. And The most important thing you can do, as I always say, is share this on all your social media platforms. I'm out.